This is the story of a football club that achieved the near impossible, breaking the dominance of Real Madrid and Barcelona to win 2 league titles in 3 years and a major European trophy. They were, for a brief, glorious period, one of the greatest teams on the continent. But success in Valencia is never simple. Their destiny is dictated by a chaotic blend of incredible talent, off-field backstabbing, and bewildering strokes of misfortune. How does a club that scaled such soaring heights come crashing back down to earth? This is the dramatic rise and crushing fall of Valencia. The story begins in the early 20th century. Valencia was formally established on the 5th of March in 1919. Its first president, Octavio Diaz, was decided by a simple yet perhaps prophetically chaotic coin toss. The club's first major triumph came in 1941, securing the Copa del Rey by defeating Espanyol in the final. This taste of success quickly spilled over, and in 1941-42, Valencia won their first La Liga championship. This was not a flash in the pan. Valencia established themselves as a domestic powerhouse in the decade. They closed out this initial success by winning the 49 Copa del Rey. The 50s saw the club grow in stature, even if the trophy haul diminished. A significant moment was the restructuring of the Mestalla, which increased the capacity to 45,000. The 60s marked Valencia's arrival on the European stage. Despite indifferent domestic league form, the club found incredible success in the Intercities Fairs Cup, the direct forerunner to the UEFA Cup. The 61-62 season saw Valencia claim their first European trophy, defeating Spanish rivals Barcelona in the final. This European success proved Valencia was capable of competing with the best across the continent. The 70s brought a return to domestic glory and a new era of iconic figures. In 1970, the club hired Alfredo Di Stefano, the legendary former player and 2-time European Footballer of the Year. His impact was immediate. In his first season, he inspired Valencia to their 4th La Liga title, and their first since 1947. This secured their first ever qualification for the prestigious European Cup. The squad of the 70s featured notable foreign stars in Johnny Rep and the iconic Argentinian forward, Mario Kempes, who became La Liga's top scorer for 2 consecutive seasons. Kempes spearheaded the next wave of European success. Valencia won the Copa del Rey again in 78-79, and in the following season they captured the European Cup Winners' Cup, beating Arsenal in the final. The mid to late 80s represent the darkest period in the club's history. After the glory of the early 80s, the club entered a period of stagnation and decline. The appointment of coach Milan Miljanovic led to a disastrous season. Although they barely avoided the drop that year, the club wrestled with heavy debt under the presidency of Vicente Tormo. The club finally hit rock bottom at the end of the 85-86 season, when they were relegated for the first time in 55 years. It was a crushing blow for the club and the city. The turnaround began under new club president, Arturo Tuzon, who was credited with steering the club back to financial and on-field stability. Di Stefano returned as coach in 86 and successfully guided Valencia back to the top flight. They finished the 80s as league runners-up to Real Madrid, securing qualification for the UEFA Cup. The Bats were back among the elite. The 90s continued the re-emergence. Gus Hiddink was appointed head coach in 91-92, leading the club to 4th place. Even with the arrival of high-profile coaches like Carlos Pereira, who signed star striker Predrag Mijatovic, consistent success remained elusive. Yet the talent was there. Coaches like Luis Aragonés and Jorge Valdano, and foreign star forwards such as Brazilian Romario, and Argentinians Claudio Lopez and Ariel Ortega. They finished second to Atletico Madrid in 95-96, after a close race but couldn't seal the title. The true prelude to the golden era came in 98-99. Under Claudio Ranieri, Valencia won their first trophy in 19 years, the Copa del Rey. More importantly, they qualified for the Champions League. The stage was set for the greatest era in the club's history. The turn of the millennium marked the beginning of Valencia's peak as a European power. The club under Argentine coach Hector Cooper transformed into a formidable, pragmatic and supremely effective side. Cooper inherited a talented, recently successful squad and immediately moulded them into a European force. The core of this team was a blend of Spanish grit and international flair. The team achieved the unimaginable: consecutive Champions League final appearances in 2000 and 2001. In the 2000 Champions League final, Valencia were outclassed by their domestic rivals Real Madrid, losing 3-0. It was a bitter lesson, but one that only fueled the team's determination. The following season, the team was even more resilient. They faced German giants Bayern Munich. The match was a tense, hard-fought affair that ended 1-1. Valencia had led through a penalty from Gaizka Mendieta, but were pegged back. The game went to a penalty shootout. Ultimately, they lost on penalties, leaving an agonising sense of what if that haunts the club to this day. To reach 2 consecutive European finals and lose both was heartbreaking, but it confirmed their status of one of Europe's elite. However, Cooper's focus on European glory came at domestic cost. Their league form was less impressive. Third place finish in 2000 was followed by a disappointing finish of 5th the following year, meaning they missed out on Champions League qualification. Valencia's 30-year wait for a La Liga title continued. Cooper departed for Inter in 2001, leaving a legacy of European steel but an unfulfilled domestic desire. The club turned to a young, unproven manager who just achieved promotion with Tenerife, Rafa Benitez. When Benitez took over in 2001, he was stepping into a decent side, but one that was hungry for domestic success and had just endured the trauma of 2 Champions League final losses. Benitez's appointment was by no means a unanimous choice, and he faced hostility from fans who expected a more proven manager. In a twist of fate that mirrors the club's chaotic existence, Benitez later admitted he was on the verge of being sacked as early as December in his first season, only to be saved by a late comeback against Espanyol. The key to Benitez's success was not just his tactical acumen, but his ability to manage a dressing room of stars and instill an unshakable will to win. The greatest challenge was the same one that faces any contender in Spain: the dominance of Barcelona and Real Madrid. In the 17 seasons before Benitez's arrival, those clubs had only been beaten twice, by Atletico Madrid in '96 and Deportivo in 2000. Benitez's genius lay in his meticulous preparation and his knack for improving players. He turned a side that played a spectacular, sometimes naive football into a defensively solid and ruthlessly efficient winning machine. In his first season, Valencia broke the duopoly, clinching the Liga title for the first time in 31 years. It was a monumental achievement. The team finished with 75 points, securing the title with a 2-0 win away at Malaga. This triumph immediately silenced the critics and established Benitez as a managerial star. The following season, in 2002-03, saw Valencia finish a disappointing 5th, but the stage had been set for an even greater triumph. The 2003-04 season was the pinnacle of the Benitez era, and arguably the club's most successful in history. The team, featuring key players like David Albelda, who had become the player with the most appearances for the club, the tenacious defender Roberto Ayala, creative engine Pablo Aimar, and the clinical striker Mista, completed a historic double. They secured the second La Liga title in 3 years, finishing with 77 points, a massive 5 points ahead of Barcelona and 7 clear of Real Madrid. Just 2 weeks later, they capped off the season by winning the UEFA Cup. In the final in Gothenburg, they defeated Marseille 2-0. The victory was somewhat comfortable after a moment of madness from Marseille's goalkeeper Fabien Barthez led to a penalty and a red card. Vicente scored the penalty and Mista sealed the win with a glorious outside-of-the-foot finish. Benitez had delivered a La Liga title and a UEFA Cup in the same season, an unprecedented feat for the club. It was the last triumph of one of the great European teams of the decade. The victory cemented Benitez's era as the club's golden age. However, the Benitez era ended abruptly. Frustrated by a perceived lack of transfer support by the club's leadership, particularly in the acquisition of defender Gabriel Heinze, Benitez famously stated that he wanted a new sofa, and they bought him a lamp. Following the UEFA Cup triumph, he resigned, departing for Liverpool. The architect of Valencia's greatest success had left, and the club's fortunes would soon begin a long and painful reversal. The departure of Benitez marked the beginning of a cycle of managerial instability and crippling financial issues. The appointment of Claudio Ranieri for a second spell was meant to restore order, but it failed. His tenure was brief, and what followed was a rotating door of coaches and a club in freefall. The financial situation was a ticking time bomb. By the mid-2000s, the club had amassed a massive internal debt that would eventually exceed 400 million euros. This debt became the defining crisis of the next decade, forcing the club to continually sell its best players to balance the books. In October 2007, the board fired Quique Flores after a string of disappointing performances. Ronald Koeman was brought in, but the disaster continued, with the team sinking to 15th, just 2 points above the relegation zone. Ironically, during this period of league turmoil, Valencia managed to lift the Copa del Rey in 2008, with a 3-1 victory over Getafe. 5 days later, following a devastating 5-1 league defeat, Koeman was sacked. Caretaker manager Voro had to step in and drag the club out of the relegation zone and battled to a 10th place finish, ending a truly disastrous league campaign. In May 2008, highly rated Unai Emery was announced as the new manager. Despite a promising start that saw the club briefly at the top of the table, the financial slump hit hard. Reports emerged that players had been unpaid for weeks. This instability compounded the problems, and the team finished a disappointing 6th, failing to qualify for the Champions League for a second successive year. The start of the new decade solidified the club's identity as a selling club. In the summer of 2010, 2 of the club's most important players, David Villa and David Silva, were sold to Barcelona and Manchester City, respectively, to reduce the debt. Yet the team rallied, finishing comfortably in 3rd place in the 2010-11 season. The next summer, captain Juan Mata was sold to Chelsea. The constant sale of top talent, a group that included some of Spain's World Cup winning generation, became a painful annual ritual, with Roberto Soldado moving to Tottenham for a reported 30 million euros in 2013. Despite the chaos, the team found a way to remain competitive, but the debt crisis was relentless. Multiple managers came and went, including Juan Pizzi, who managed to lead the team into the semi-finals of the Europa League in 2013-14, only to lose to eventual winners Sevilla on away goals. And the league finish of 8th confirmed the club's descent from the elite. The financial abyss finally led to a change in ownership. In 2014, Singaporean businessman Peter Lim bought 70.4% of the shares owned by the club's foundation. After months of negotiation, Lim's takeover was finalised in the summer of 2014. The first major sign of Lim's influence came immediately. Juan Pizzi was unexpectedly sacked and replaced by Nuno Espirito Santo. This move raised eyebrows, as Nuno was a client of the powerful football agent Jorge Mendes, who was also a close friend and business partner of Lim. The fans were immediately concerned about the growing influence of an outside agent on the club's sporting decisions. Nuno's first season, 2014-15, was a successful one, helped by new signings like Alvaro Negredo, Andre Gomez, and Enzo Perez. Valencia finished in 4th place for Champions League qualification, edging out Sevilla by a single point in a dramatic final week. However, the cracks quickly appeared. The following year was a disaster. The club's best defender, Nicolas Otamendi, was sold to Manchester City for £32 million. The team failed to progress from the Champions League group stages and suffered a poor start to the league campaign. Following Nuno's resignation, former Manchester United defender Gary Neville was hired as manager. Another choice seen by many as connected to the Mendes-Lim partnership. Neville recorded the lowest win percentage in La Liga history, winning just 3 out of 16 before being sacked in March 2016. The club finished the season in a dismal 12th place. The next season, coach Paco Ayestarán was sacked after 4 straight defeats. Former Italy coach Cesare Prandelli was hired but resigned after just 3 months, claiming the club made false transfer promises. Sporting director Jesus Pitarch also resigned, saying he felt used as a shield for criticism. Voro was again named caretaker manager for the 5th time and steered the club away from relegation. The only bright spot came with the appointment of coach Marcelino. Under his stewardship, Valencia experienced a brief but spectacular resurgence. In his first season, they secured a 4th place finish and a return to the Champions League. The club finished 4th again in 2018-19 and reached the semi-finals of the Europa League, and most gloriously, won the Copa del Rey, upsetting Barcelona in the final for their first trophy since 2008. Marcelino was widely credited as the architect of this success and the miraculous recovery, but their story, like so many at Valencia, ended in tragedy. In September 2019, Marcelino was fired after publicly criticising Peter Lim. The stability was shattered and chaos returned. By 2020, under Lim's ownership, the club had churned through 6 different managers and 6 different sporting directors. The final cost of the mismanagement became staggering. In the 20-21 season, Javi Garcia was put in charge of a team full of prospects after the club failed to sign any players during the transfer window. Key players like Dani Parejo and local wonder kid Ferran Torres were sold, Torres moving to Manchester City for half his market value. Overall, Valencia sold players worth €85 million to rebalance its books. Under Peter Lim's ownership, Valencia had accumulated losses of €323 million. The playing squad's quality was significantly cut. Salaries went unpaid. And the club's stature plummeted. The once deafening Mestalla was now filled with the sound of criticism of the ownership. The story of Valencia is a powerful, often heartbreaking narrative. The club's legacy is defined not just by the trophies they won, but the sheer, unadulterated passion of the fans and the dramatic nature of their journey. The Benitez years provided the ultimate blueprint for breaking the La Liga dominance of Barcelona and Real Madrid. He showed it could be done, not with massive spending, but with tactical acumen, a unified dressing room, and ruthless efficiency. The club's history is filled with iconic figures, from the goal-scoring genius of Mario Kempes and the 2 times Champions League finalist Mendieta, to the unwavering loyalty of captain David Albelda. These are the legends whose spirit continues to define the club. The post-Benitez decline was amplified and made existential by the financial crisis of the late 2000s, and it turned the club into a symbol of modern football's economic pressures. They became a club forced to sell its best players to survive. The legacy of players like Villa and Silva and Mata is a bittersweet one for Valencia fans. They're players that they developed and sold at their peak. It was a necessary sacrifice, but one that often leaves fans thinking, what if? The Peter Lim era is perhaps the most painful chapter of all. It represents not a decline due to unavoidable debt, but a systemic deterioration brought on by mismanagement and an overwhelming lack of understanding for the club's culture and history. The firing of the successful Marcelino, simply because the manager dared to voice criticism, was seen as a ruthless corporate decision, and it played into the owner's ego and his business partnerships above the club's sporting success. The glorious 2018-19 season, which was capped by a Copa del Rey victory, stands as a miraculous anomaly, a final burst of the Valencian spirit, a moment where the players, the manager, and the fans defied the turmoil swirling above them. It was a victory for the human element of the game, proving that chemistry and shared will can still trump everything. In the seasons that followed, the consequences of the ownership's decisions became painfully clear. In 21-22, the club managed to reach the Copa del Rey final, only to lose on penalties to Real Betis. These cup runs have become lifelines, the last connection to the club's legacy as a cup-winning team. But they can't hide the long-term slide. The club that once reached back-to-back Champions League finals and broke the La Liga duopoly has become a mid-table, debt-ridden entity. Yet the Mestalla remains. It's the core of the club's identity, a place where the collective roar of the fans embodies the fiery emotion and unwavering loyalty that no amount of debt or managerial chaos can extinguish. The final chapter of Valencia's story has not yet been written. The club remains trapped, whose destiny is held hostage by a business model that seemingly prioritises asset sales over sporting competitiveness. The bat on the crest has flown high, tasted the sweetest victories, and endured the deepest humiliations. Its legacy is a testament to the fact that in football, the most compelling stories are not found in logical progression, but in the dramatic, passionate struggle against the odds. The question for Valencia is no longer can they win trophies, but when the winds will change and allow the soul of the club, the players and the fans, to once again steer the ship back to the elite. It's a story of one of Spain's greatest teams, reduced from champions to a cautionary tale, waiting for the day the whisper of the wind becomes a roar of redemption. If you like underdog stories and football with a soul, hit like and subscribe. What are your memories of these great Valencia sides? Let us know in the comments below. And in the meantime, stay tuned for more football history, one incredible story